I don't believe that you can make transformations happen. All you can do is to mulch the soil and, put dead leaves and manure in and sort of kick it around and make it loose and personalize it. Because I just looked back at a videotape of an interview that I did at one of the big conferences. And I was so struck by the fact that I went up to each person, stared at them, took their hand forcefully, and asked their name, both parts, and made some kind of comment. But there was that physical connection, which I was very forceful about. And I was laughing because it was a silly thing to do, but I just insisted on every person there, like earnest, just being very earnest and very silly in a way, both.
But your example, I think the reason this came to mind is that I'm always afraid of that question about skills,
About what?
I'm always afraid of that question about skills, what
skills? No.
But I find that which you can't do in a large conference, but I find those moments when you can weave a web, you stop getting those questions.
Yeah. Well, let me tell the story about Pietro Barbetta, who's, I attended a seminar of his. Of course, they were talking Italian, and I was not understanding all of it. But Pietro he was interviewing a young man from Morocco, who the healer who would have worked with him had a theory that melancholy, because the young man was sort of depressed, melancholy was not a possibility, and that he only worked with melancholy. And so he referred the young man to Pietro. And so it turned out that this young man had taken a job in a factory in Bergamo, which is where we were, and that his fellow workers were mocking him because he'd fallen, had a crush on, or had fallen for a young girl in the drugstore opposite the workplace. So one day he brought a rose, and then everybody started laughing at him, and so he could hardly bear going to work. And he also wanted to help a cousin of his who'd arrived, and so Pietro was saying, I can help you with that. But the depression or the melancholy or the sense that he was bummed out by his job, he suddenly declared, sort of interrupting everything, but in an hour I will be in hell. And that just triggered me all over the place, because I feel that whenever something like that comes forward, you have to grasp it no matter how hard it is. So I turned to Pietro and I said, wait a minute, this man says in an hour he will be in hell. And so I said, maybe you could ask him about spirits that could accompany him. I thought of what Michael White would do with imaginary spirits or whatever. And Pietro got the idea, but I said, does he have any jinns? Because I thought that was a spirit that was helpful. Not at all. That's a malevolent spirit. The grins was the word for the jinn or the helpful person. So and apparently people in his family who were dead or alive, they would all be grins that would help him. And so we put his father, who is dead, on his head, and or Pietro did, and his mother and his sister, who were alive, on each of his shoulders. And then he put me and Pietro on his forearms. And thus attired, he walked into hell. And this is,
it's witness therapy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you could teach that.
No.
All you can do is expose people to experiences of that nature and hope they